North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. What do? We report the news. We report the news honestly and fairly. We report the news honestly, fairly, and then we analyze it for fact and bias. We point out that every chance we can and every time we see it. We make commentary. That's not the news. That's just my opinion, just as valuable as yours, and therefore we debate. So news, analysis, commentary, and debate. Welcome to the Wells Report. It's Friday, the 13th. You know what that means? Neither do I. So it's Friday the 13th. Is it really bad luck? Well, you could ask the Biden administration. They're having a real bad run these days. And we're going to talk about that shortly as we bring you what's going on here in the news on the Wells Report. So Jim Jordan is getting busy. He has jumped into his new job as chairman of the House Judiciary Committee with an investigation. His first investigation as chairman of that committee is going to examine President Biden's mishandling of classified documents and the Justice Department investigation into that very thing. The investigation led by Jordan comes one day after Attorney General Merrick Garland appointed a special counsel to examine the matter, former U.S. Attorney Robert Hur. The Justice Department escalated it to a special counsel investigation from review. This happened yesterday after a second stash of classified documents were found inside the garage of President Biden's Wilmington, Delaware home. The first documents were found inside a Washington, D.C. office of the Penn Biden Center think tank. Somehow, Biden and think tank. Anybody else notice that? Just asking. We are conducting oversight of the Justice Department actions with respect to former Vice President's mishandling of classified documents, including the apparently unauthorized possession of classified material at a Washington, D.C. private office and in the garage of his Wilmington, Delaware residence. This from Jordan and Representative Mike Johnson of not Los Angeles, Louisiana. He is also a Republican. Quote, on January 12, 2023, you appointed Robert Hur as special counsel to investigate these matters. The circumstance of this appointment raises fundamental oversight questions that the committee routinely examines. We expect your complete cooperation with our inquiry. Jordan is questioning the alleged concealment of information by the DOJ as the White House admitted the first batch of documents at the Penn Biden Center were discovered just days before the 2022 midterm elections, but were not disclosed publicly until January. This is a little bit stickier than you might think because here's the situation. First, they find these documents. Lawyers find them. Biden's lawyers cleaning out his closet in an old office. Anyway, so they find these documents in November, just before the midterm elections. Nobody says a word. It continues. Months go by. They find a second tranche, a second group of these classified documents. Then the story comes out. Did they announce, okay, classified documents have been found in two places? No. What they announced is they announced the first group of classified documents, but they knew about the second one. And they didn't just take care of it right up front, say, hey, we got to talk about both these places of documents and let the chips fall where they may. They didn't do that. They tried to conceal it. Why? We're going to be talking about missteps courtesy of CNN here in a minute. So when you do that, what it looks like to me is it looks like at the very least, the management of a potentially politically explosive situation. And that explosive situation has certainly blown up in the faces of the Biden administration as we see fit. Anhoy Guzman just drops by. She is the first to win the chat room derby today. She says, were they really discovered on November 2nd or just turned over to the archives in November? It doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make any difference. The thing about it is this, it's bad enough that these things were discovered 6 days before the election, let alone whether or not they were discovered a week before or a few days before and then turned over to the archives on the 2nd. It doesn't really make any difference because the damage is already done. But that damage gets worse when you start thinking about the fact that they had the second group of documents virtually at the same time, certainly in the time space that they discovered the first ones, but they didn't announce it. At the very least, that's being evasive. And then they come out and say, hey, we're being completely transparent. No, you're not. You're not being transparent now. You haven't been transparent before. So why would anybody do something so stupid as to use the word transparent? They can't say, well, we forgot about the second group. They can't say that. This is a huge problem. These people have conditioned themselves to look at politics first and then lie as necessary. When we consider, in this particular case only, when we consider the fact that Democrat government policy seems to be predicated on the default setting of dishonesty, that should raise red flags with everyone. The question is, does it? It certainly does with me. You simply can't have it both ways. You can't say you're being transparent without being transparent. You have to be straightforward. The president did address it rather quickly. He didn't do it the way I would have done it. I would have said, I feel so stupid. I feel so stupid. And this is what I would have advised him to say. I feel really stupid today. I called out my predecessor for being irresponsible on having classified documents, and here they are. I welcome whatever law enforcement process needs to happen, and we'll go through it as best we can. If he'd have done that, Americans don't like presidents lying. They don't. That's why all these lies that were attributed to Donald Trump based on honest differences of opinion. I say honest. Were they really? Because, who kept track of the lies? Who identified the lies and then kept track of them? Well, the mainstream media. The mainstream media is decidedly against the right and most assuredly against Donald Trump. So the people of the United States, they didn't jump all over that. They didn't jump all over the fact, oh my God, Trump lied. The only thing that was a news story and a talking point for people who wanted to annoy their neighbors, both of which happened, of course. And so if presidents would stop lying, are you listening, President Biden? Okay, let me rephrase that to something more accurate. Are you listening, one of President Biden's handlers? Are you doing that? You got to listen here. Joe makes mistakes. You can try to say, no, he doesn't. Joe Biden is a great president. He doesn't make mistakes. Well, if he doesn't make mistakes, then he's absolutely lying. And he's absolutely evading truth, which is very close to obstruction of justice. Very close. They're kissing cousins, in fact. What they should have done is they should have used his bumbles as something to humanize him. Hi. We got some news today that some classified documents were found in one of my old offices on the University of Pennsylvania campus. We also found that there were documents, this should have happened at the same time. We also found that there were documents in my garage. Boy, do I feel stupid. After raking my predecessor over the coals for this very thing, I end up being guilty of it or apparently being guilty of it myself. I wouldn't. I throw out the apparently. I'm guilty of it myself. We welcome whatever moves are necessary by the Department of Justice. We'll ride through this and do the best we can with it. And I promise full transparency moving forward. That's it. That's how you handle this stuff. But these people in Washington, D.C. have made lying. Oh, my goodness gracious. Thank you very much. Hang on just a couple of seconds. A little technical glitch. I was busy today and forgot to change the date on the broadcast, and there we have it. No, I got to go this way. There we have it. New change of date. Okay, thank you. Friday the 13th. Oh. Thank you, Ms. Lois Floyd. So the President of the United States and everybody in Washington, D.C., either undervalue or as a default set aside the value of honesty. That is a red flag for every voter in the United States. Every single one. What you have to do is you have to make sure that you do a couple of different things. One, that you are indeed honest with the American people. And two, that the people who are trying to explain your bumbleism, shall we say, I just realized that a really good nickname for President Biden, considering the first letter of his last name, would be Bumblebee. Anyway, if somebody uses that in a meme somewhere, would you credit the Wells Report? Yeah. So anyway, knowing that your boss bumbles, what you need to do is you need to make sure that you don't. And you need to make sure that what you do is you say, okay, here are the answers to these questions. This is what we want to do. This is how we're going to handle this moving forward. That's not Karine Jean-Pierre. Karine Jean-Pierre is another one of those things. I'm sorry. Karine Jean-Pierre is another one of those people whose default setting is, shall we say, not being candid. The default setting is to try to spin whatever happens, no matter how stupid, and this is stupid, no matter how stupid, into something that is, well, less of a problem than you think. And the way they do that is by saying, you have to contact the White House counsel. No, you got to contact the DOJ. No, you got to contact you. You don't do that, Ms. Jean-Pierre. You don't do that. What you do is you get the White House counsel up there on the podium. You tell everybody in the press corps, okay, we're going to answer questions on these topics. And that's what you do. Now, granted, this is Monday morning quarterbacking. This is comment from the peanut gallery because I've never been a White House press secretary, but I have been someone who have spoken to the press in an official capacity. And all I can tell you is, hey, look, I'm not going to lie for you. I'm going to advocate for your messages. But the White House messaging group needs to be better at giving me better messages to advocate for. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Just got an alert from Fox News. The Centers for Disease Control says that a preliminary COVID-19 vaccine safety signal has been identified, and they are investigating whether the bivalent Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine creates an increased risk of ischemic stroke in people 65 years of age or older. Ischemic stroke is different than, say, for example, a stroke that is caused by a rupture of a blood vessel or something. Ischemic stroke refers to a curtailment of oxygen to a particular part of the brain. That's what a stroke is. When something compromises the blood flow to a particular area of the brain. In the statement, the CDC says the preliminary signal was not identified with the bivalent Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. That's the vaccine that I took 3 times and then got COVID. Quote, following the availability and use of the updated bivalent COVID-19 vaccines, the CDC's Vaccine Safety Data Link, a near real-time service system, it's called VAERS, I took part in it myself, met the statistical criteria to prompt additional investigation into whether there was a safety concern for ischemic stroke in people ages 65 and older who received the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine bivalent. Rapid response investigation of the signal in the VSD raised a question of whether people 65 years and older who have received the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine bivalent were more likely to have an ischemic stroke in the 21 days following vaccination compared to the 22 to 44 days following vaccination, so said the CDC. It's developing. We will keep our eyes on the story. I can tell you that there's a little bit of murkiness with regards to injury from the vaccines that we've all, most of us have taken. And that is, there may be a liability curtailment. In other words, when they were making it possible to rush these vaccines to market, what ended up happening was they put something in there to protect Big Pharma from hurting people. Now, whether that's going to actually be sustained in a courtroom or not remains to be seen, because this is absolutely headed to court. There's no doubt about it. There is no doubt about it. So what we've got here is we've got a circumstance whereby people in the United States government first developed and then provided a vaccine. The error in all of this and the opening for liability that leads right to the United States government is the forcing of people to take these vaccines. And there's no leg to stand on from a constitutional standpoint in this. The federal government can't force you to take a vaccine, especially one that's only authorized for emergency use. That was ridiculous. It was ridiculous, and as it turns out, might just have been dangerous. There's an awful lot of anecdotal information about young athletes with myocarditis. That's an inflammation of the heart muscle. And these sudden deaths of people way under, and of symptoms or a cause way under the typical age range. And all of this has to figure out, we have to figure out just exactly where things stand with regards to these vaccines. And then we also have to find out, okay, well, if there is a problem, then who's liable? The federal government. In order to successfully sue the federal government, you have to prove negligence. And that might be very difficult to prove. But then again, I suppose if you make enough noise, then people will simply settle things and move on, which works to the benefit of those complaining or those filing suit because they feel they were damaged by these vaccines. Like I said, this is a breaking story. We'll have more about it coming up in just a couple of seconds. It's only about 15, 20 minutes old. We'll get back to the Judiciary Committee and some other things that they are doing as they chase down Justice Department activity regarding classified information in a moment. This is the Wells Report. Back in a flash. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us. Our telephone number, 817-379-2172. I wanted to spend a little bit of time before we move any further going through some of the chats. By the way, there is a chat room and I pay attention to it. Chris Grimes, a new friend of the Wells Report, said Sunday will be the 14th anniversary of George Santos successfully landing U.S. Airways Flight 1549 in the Hudson after striking a flock of birds after takeout. After takeoff, rather. That was funny, Chris. It was. Yeah. By the way, Isaac points out that George Santos also threw 6 touchdowns in Super Bowl 49 and hopped on a plane to score 30 points in the NCAA tournament. Oh, goodness gracious. Goodness gracious. Somebody is telling me my camera is way out of focus. Is that true? Would you let me know? By the way, something else popped up that I wasn't able to follow up on. I just tried. That Fox News was confirming that the DOJ has found a third set of classified documents. I don't know what that is, but we'll take a look at it, and we'll find out a little bit later on. This is a breaking news story, obviously. And so what we're doing here is this show, we have the flexibility to react, but there are certain limits. Like, for example, during the break, I was trying to find out more on that story. I found a video courtesy of a guy on Twitter, but I kind of like to chase down the original source. And so that's what I'm going to be doing. But that'll happen probably here in a little bit, and I'll have that. So stay right where you are. We were talking a little bit about how Jim Jordan is going to start looking at what is alleged concealment of information regarding Joe Biden's classified document issue. And what he's going to do is he's going to make that the first investigation as he takes over the chairmanship of the House Judiciary Committee. The White House admitted the first batch of documents at the Penn Biden Center were discovered days before the 2022 midterm elections, but not disclosed publicly until January. He's going to find out. This is what he says, quote, "It's unclear when the Department of Justice first came to learn about the existence of these documents and whether it actively concealed this information from the public on the eve of the 2022 elections. It's also unclear what interactions, if any, the department had with President Biden or his representatives about his mishandling of classified material. The department's actions here appear to depart how it acted in similar circumstances." That's a shot at the DOJ chasing Donald Trump. Now, we don't have any idea whether the DOJ modified the way it goes about presidents with classified information based on their experience with President Trump or that they're playing politics. Considering the political past of the DOJ these days, you can't rule out the fact that it's politics. You just can't. You certainly can't rule out the fact that while Donald Trump suffered an embarrassing, unbelievable SWAT team raid at his house in Mar-a-Lago, that apparently the FBI just sort of, wandered on in and took a look at Joe Biden's house, et cetera, very hush-hush down below, under the radar. Yeah, that's something else that's going to have to happen too, because clearly, once again, the hypocrisy is overwhelming in this. It's just plain hypocrisy. And that's awful. That's just awful. So we'll see. Chris Grimes says that President Biden wasn't on the 2022 ballot. That's a good point. He wasn't. But other people wearing Democrat labels were. At some point. And you can see it because, say, for example, the View, now they're beginning to question President Biden. How bad does something have to get before the View actually starts taking shots at President Biden? Well, that's what's happening. That's what's happening. And once again, if you're not upset by what has happened in the Biden administration regarding its effect on we, the people of the United States, just stay tuned. It's going to get worse. Let's see. Langston says Biden called authorities while Trump lied about having documents after he was given a chance to return them. That is a partisan statement, and there are certainly mitigating circumstances in it, but I read it. Okay. So there you go. The lawmakers on Capitol Hill referenced the FBI's unprecedented raid on former President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago home last summer, seized classified documents as an example of how the DOJ has proceeded differently in the past than it has proceeded with Biden. At the time, Biden slammed Trump for being irresponsible for keeping classified documents. Quote, in fact, on August 8th, 2022, despite the publicly available evidence of President Trump's voluntary cooperation, you personally approved the decision to seek a warrant for excessive and unprecedented access to his private residence. On August 15th, 2022, committee Republicans wrote to you and FBI Director Christopher Wray requesting documents and information related to the FBI's raid on the Trump residence, according to the letter. The department and the FBI have failed to sufficiently comply with that request. Our requests remain outstanding. Jordan is demanding documents and communications regarding the appointment of her. That's the guy who's overseeing this investigation into the Biden classified documents, and between the DOJ and the FBI related to classified materials. Garland said that his appointment of her as special counsel is critical for an even-handed review of the matter. Quote, I am confident that Attorney Herr will carry out his responsibility in an even-handed and urgent manner and in accordance with the highest traditions of this department. Ooh, that's an unfortunate statement. Once again, who's ever writing these statements for these guys, they need to at least acknowledge reality, even if the person reading them won't. Goodness gracious, what a mistake. These people are making mistakes left, right, and center. CNN, and talking about just how crazy it is that, it's finally getting bad enough so that Joe Biden is being castigated by what has been a strong ally of liberal Democrat politics. This from CNN. Joe Biden is facing the worst political crisis of his presidency after a failed attempt at damage control over his classified document controversy. He landed him with what all White Houses dread, the naming of a special counsel. I think that might be a touch of an overstatement there. Insofar as the withdrawal from Afghanistan, I think is far worse than this, but once again, degrees of bad are still bad. Biden was doomed to face a political furor. Now remember, this is CNN. Biden was doomed to face a political furor the moment his lawyers found the first secret presidential file in his former Washington office last fall. But by swiftly cooperating with the National Archives, this is bias, his legal team may have spared him from criminal exposure for the discovery like the potential criminal exposure facing President Donald Trump. But then the botched messaging strategy became more clear when Americans learned that a second batch of classified material, also dating to Biden's time as vice president, had been found in a search of his home in Delaware. The detail was communicated to the Justice Department on December 20th. What a mistake. And yet the White House did not disclose that this week when it spoke about the initial documents found last year in an office Biden previously used at the Penn Biden Center in Washington. This made it look like it was willing to come clean to the DOJ, but certainly not the public. Not only did this make Biden look like he had something to hide, it set up a kind of a drip, drip, drip of disclosures guaranteed to supercharge a Washington scandal. And Biden's bid yesterday to minimize the discovery of secret material in his garage, saying it was locked to protect his beloved Corvette, didn't exactly back up his earlier claim that Americans know he takes classified documents seriously. Yeah, he has to be forthright. Now he has to be careful. Remember, all we've heard him talk about on any of this came from a piece of paper that was in front of him. So certainly this entire event is being managed by those who manage the president. The result is the White House has offered a huge opening for a new Republican House majority feverishly committed, bias, to providing its own conspiracy theories that a liberal deep state has politicized justice to attack Trump and is covering up wrongdoing by Democrat presidents. And it has also made the prospect of any future prosecution of Trump over his Mar-a-Lago document stash, which may pose his greatest risk of criminal charges, even more politically explosive. I would say impossible. It's absolutely impossible. Trump, as he showed in his laceration of a 2016 Democrat nominee Hillary Clinton over emails, is merciless in exploding a whiff of scandal against his opponent. This is where the bias of CNN makes itself apparent again. He's now certain to leap on an impression of a compromised transparency model to mold a campaign trail assault over Biden's classified document troubles designed to blur his culpability in a far more serious case. Well, okay, when you write that, you can reverse it and come up with the same validity. Trump's ally Kevin McCarthy, the new Republican Speaker of the House, laid out what could be an effective case, at least for conservatives, yesterday. Quote, here's an individual that said on 60 Minutes that was so concerned about President Trump's documents, and now we find, just as a vice president, without a lot of the protections the president has, keeping it for years in the open in different locations. Yeah, that was something that I didn't think about when I was watching this. It came out that these documents were moved twice. They were first moved to some place where the GAO drops all this stuff. And then they were moved again. Some to the Penn Biden Center, and some moved to the residence. Like I said, I'm reasonably sure this vaporous story of a third group of documents, I haven't chased that down, totally unconfirmed by this reporter at this time on this broadcast. I'm going to look at it in just a couple of seconds. You know, I'm pretty sure there are going to be more of these. And those people who support the president and those people who do not support the president need to be aware that there's another shoe that's going to drop here, or two, or three. It just depends on whether or not, I was saying that when you're accusing President Trump of mishandling of classified documents and you say something along the lines of President Trump was hopelessly irresponsible, that you should have gone through your stuff first. That may be what we're seeing here, but it seems the timing works more to the defensive strategy as opposed to a proactive one. In other words, before you start talking about this, Mr. President, we got to go through your stuff. We have to go through your stuff and get that all done. Also, we're still not addressing whether or not the lawyers involved actually had a security clearance required to be able to see that information. That's also important. It's important. Let me get to some of these things here. Let's see. Eddie Jones says this is all kabuki theater. Yeah. Okay, switching to Twitch with improved video quality. Okay, so I was asking whether or not my camera was fuzzy, and I haven't seen that. I haven't seen a reply to that. Mike, is the camera still way out of focus? I don't know whether it's me or something else, and I need to find out. Let's see. Biden called authorities while Trump lied about having documents after he was given a chance to return them. The prevailing news talked about the cooperation of the president. It may not have been quick enough for those people that wanted to start throwing rocks at the president, President Trump, but he was cooperating, and it's documented, both in the news media and in the official record. Yvonne says the View was defending him the other day, saying that Biden didn't do anything wrong, but Trump did. Yeah, the duality is inescapable. Duplicity, if you wish. It happened. Joe Behar got in a shot on Joe Biden. Let's see, Isaac says Langston is correct. After refusing to turn in documents in continual negotiations, the subpoena was granted and the FBI did their jobs. Well, then why didn't they do their jobs the same way with President Biden? Why haven't they issued a subpoena for any other further records? Why haven't they done a raid on all of his other residences to make sure that there's no more classified information available? Well, I can actually argue against the point that I make with the question. And the argument is, it's one thing to raid a former president's house. That's of course unprecedented, but it's one thing to do that with a former president. and quite another to do that with a sitting president. So once again, this isn't cut and dry. This isn't cut and dried to satisfy an instant political snark. Okay? You've got to look at this in a broad mean here. That's what you have to do. Let's see. Time for the Freedom Caucus to slam them hard. Well, we'll probably see. How is a Washington scandal supersized? LM Dronebot says that. Yeah, if it's happening in Washington and it's a scandal, it's already supersized. I get your point. Let's see who else. All this paper chase reminds me of Alcon days when I was involved getting a lot of implementation of documents. I got to go, so I'll see you in just a couple of seconds. Bye-bye now. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. While we're talking about the mainstream media turning on President Biden, although it's kind of muted, hell has most assuredly frozen over. CNN has an employee named Don Lemon. He's now a morning show host, and he had Chuck Schumer on his show the other day. Check out how this happened.
White House public statements earlier this week offered an incomplete narrative about the classified documents from Biden's time as vice president, reinforced the need for a special counsel. The misleading statements created the impression that Biden's team had something to hide. That doesn't sound that much different than the former president.
John, there's now a special prosecutor. Let's see what they have to say. We can have all this speculation and comment let's see what they have to say, and let's focus on doing things that help the American people.
But Senator, I have to say this. You seem much more measured about this than with the Trump documents, because you call for transparency with the Trump documents. You wanted lawmakers to have access to the documents seized from the former president, his residence in Florida, which it seems like you.
Bottom line is, I said that night, it's premature to comment on what should be done. And I stick by that. Yes, for President Trump. That's exactly right.
You think that your statements are consistent for both?
I sure do.
For both.
You bet.
Okay.
So you said the president has fully cooperated, and there's no indication that he and the White House have not. But there is a real question about transparency and what the American people deserve.
Prosecutors will get to the bottom of this, and let's let them do it, for God's sakes. I know you all want to buzz around and all of that, but
let me buzz for a minute. Okay, let me buzz for 1 minute, and I promise we'll get on to something else.
It's not just us buzzing around. You're the Democratic head of the Senate. This is a really important issue. It's not just buzzing around.
And if there were no special prosecutor, there would be, you might have a different thing to say, but there is. And now we have the law enforcement people who have the power to get all the facts out doing it. I support both. I think we should have a special prosecutor on each. I don't mind your asking these questions, but my view is I'm not going to say anything. Let the special prosecutors do their job.
We are confident that a thorough review will show that these documents were inadvertently misplaced, and the president and his lawyers acted promptly upon discovering of this mistake.
All right, so there you go with the latest, and this was Don Lemon, the best I've seen him. If you ignore everything he's ever said up to this point, that was actually not bad. That was a little bit of tasty journalism. Getting back to some of the things on the chat room today, Ann Hoy Guzman says judicial ruling in 1978 says presidents have the right to papers. Ruling was because Clinton had stuff all over the place, including tapes in his sock drawer. So where does anything allow a vice president the ability to have classified documents? All this paper chase, says Gary, reminds me of Alcon days. This is what I was talking about earlier when I was involved in getting a lot of our old implementation documents ready for the archive. Exciting work. Well, with all due respect to your company, that is not the stuff that you were dealing with. May have been snoozy because it wasn't top secret, secured, compartmented information. All right. Let's see. AIDS found the stuff in the house and garage. Did they have a security clearance? Well, it depends on who's doing the search. It does. Some of those, by the way, some of those people do have security clearances, right? The question is, does President Trump's lawyer group have those security clearances? Further, it's a broad term when we talk about President Biden. Did I say Donald Trump? I meant President Biden. It's a broad term when you start talking about lawyers. They could be lawyers from the White House counsel's office, in which case they would have those security clearances. Okay, let's see. Biden would be off the hook if President Obama announced, yep, I let him have the documents. Yeah, I got it. Langston says this, I love it you all are playing this up, but Trump had hundreds of documents. Now JD is taking this seriously. No, I took it seriously last time. No, I took this very, very seriously, especially the DOJ reaction, which is decidedly different than the one they have with President Biden. Now, the thing to keep in mind is President Biden's a sitting president. At the time, President Trump was a former president. Is there leeway to handle those situations differently? Yeah. Is there even leeway to try to very cautiously do these kinds of work when you're dealing with a sitting president? Absolutely, there's a difference. But I think what's absolutely irrefutable are the precedents set by the way the government under Joe Biden handled this with President Trump. And what's good for the Republican is good for the Democrat. Okay, so when we talk about the stylistic differences between the gathering of this information, we have to keep that in mind. That's just what we have to do. Let's see what else. Or maybe President Biden just thought it and didn't tell Biden. That's a possibility. By the way, I brought this up the other day. President Biden is now the president of the United States. And he was the president of the United States before we found out about these documents, even before we found out that they had been discovered. What the president could have done was said, yeah, sometime a few months ago, I went ahead and declassified everything that I had. But he didn't. He didn't. And what he said was, yeah, I got the documents right there beside my Corvette. Oops. And that was off script, which is why the president needs to have everything scripted for him. Just to be fair, President Trump probably did a lot of serious damage to himself by virtue of the fact that he probably did some very serious damage to himself by virtue of the fact that he spoke off the cuff too much. Presidents have that stuff wired tight. And President Trump was much more forthcoming and much more straightforward with what he thought at the second he was saying it, because he had so much confidence in his communication capability. Well, most of that's okay, but some of it really hurt him. So once again, you go back to President Bush. President Bush read everything as well. And when you handle all of this stuff, not just for political reasons, but certainly legal ones, you have to have these messages very carefully crafted. You have to have them very carefully crafted so the president doesn't do what he did the other day with Peter Doocy, which was essentially admit to a crime. This is the Wells Report. We have, we got another hour coming up next. Stay put. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. What do? We report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. We make commentary. That's not news, just my opinion. And my opinion is subject to debate, and that's what we do. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. Do it a couple of different ways. You can join us on the chat room. By all means, do so. We appreciate that. Or you can call me on the telephone if you want to move a little bit faster, 817-379-2172. I said, oh, Biden. I didn't mean to do that. Yeah, it drives me crazy. It drives me crazy when I do that. Let's see, going to the chat room right now. Let's see. Okay, Joe Biden didn't have anything to do with the government handling of Trump. Well, the guy at the top has responsibility. Remember, it's his DOJ. The DOJ works for the chief executive in the executive branch. He gets the responsibility. Remember that sign on President Truman's desk? The buck stops here. There you go. Let's see. Garland and the FBI negotiated with Trump and did not reveal ongoing negotiations until the raid, says Isaac. Now, that's true. And what's interesting about that is there are an awful lot of people that say that President Trump was not cooperating. When he was cooperating, was reported that he was cooperating, but it was in the background until the raid. And then what they have to do is they have to start explaining why they raided a former president's house for the first time ever. And so all that came tumbling out. To then go back and say, well, he wasn't cooperating when it was all being handled behind closed doors. That invalidates that argument. Let's see what else. Oh, yeah, we got to talk about that. We're going to get to that, Chris. The Trump Organization sentenced to pay $1.6 million in fines and I believe it was 17 counts. Like I said, we're going to be talking about that. You know what? We can probably do that right now. I think I was planning on talking about that right after our last topic, but we had some other things that we had to take care of. So we'll go back to last hour. By the way, a pretty good hour. You ought to check it out. Anyway, so the Trump Organization sentenced to pay $1.6 million in fines in tax fraud cases. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the USA Today article on that. Two of former President Donald Trump's namesake companies were sentenced today, to pay $1.6 million after last month's guilty verdicts on tax fraud charges that scarred his business empire with criminal convictions. That's exactly what happened. No bias there. The Trump Corporation, which was convicted of 9 felonies, was sentenced to a maximum fine of $810,000. The Trump Payroll Company, which was convicted of 8 felonies, was sentenced to a maximum fine of $800,000. Does this damage President Trump? I mean, do these fines and convictions damage President Trump? Yeah. Because just as I was saying about President Biden and the DOJ, President Trump is the chief executive officer, at least I think he is, of these two companies, or at least he was. We have to harden that up, whether he was actually running the companies or somebody else was. But it really doesn't matter because he's Donald Trump. The Trump Organization, the Trump Payroll Company, the Trump is the Donald. So yeah, he's got responsibility here. Now, obviously, if he was complicit, he'd be headed to jail. Okay? He would be headed to jail and all of this stuff would go away because President Trump would be absolutely not a viable candidate for the presidency of the United States. Absolutely, that would do it in. But his name's on these companies. So once again, at some level, he's responsible. He's absolutely responsible. Okay? So let's see. Let's see. What do we have here? Chris is moving on to Missouri Republicans adopting a stricter House dress code, but just for women. GOP once again telling women how they should live their lives. Yeah, they should leave that kind of stuff to Cosmopolitan. I'm sorry. By the way, Gary says, Biden is perfect. Obama is pulling strings behind the scenes. Yeah, I know. If the FBI negotiates with you, this is Isaac Tate. If the FBI negotiates with you, gives you a chance to return stolen items, but you give them what you want them to have, that's a subjective statement. You don't know that that's what happened. You get subpoenas and refuse to comply, I think a raid is warranted. Okay, that's perfectly fine. So once again, the vice president, well, the president now, the vice president then had these documents for years. For years and years and years. The idea that this was an inadvertent transfer, well, it sort of kind of goes by the wayside insofar as these documents were moved twice. And if there are indeed classified documents in it, and it's possible, I suppose, that President Biden didn't realize it right up to the point where some of the documents that started out in the boxes in the garage ended up in another room of the house. That's not inadvertent. It's just not. Does it damage President Trump? Chris, who I think is a Democrat, says, does it damage President Trump? No. It's part and parcel of his business practice over his entire career. His fervent supporters don't care. Well, that's on them. Do I care? Sure I do. Sure, I absolutely do. You know, President Trump has been hounded not just by the federal government, the DOJ, and so on and so forth, but all kinds of people trying to pin him with something. So far, it hasn't worked. Now, it's either because he has an amazingly successful criminal enterprise that has so far gone unscrutinized, or he may not be guilty of anything. There's a third possibility, I suppose. He does not have a son named Hunter that is a little bit scatterbrained when it comes to his personal laptop. So there you go. Let's see what else happened here. Trump University, Chris Grimes says, hey, remember, that was a $25 million penalty for fraud. There you go. So either the president needs to be more careful with the people he hires, or he is complicit in these crimes. And of course, if he was complicit, then what had happened would be he would be in jail by now. So that didn't happen. But does it stain him? Sure it does. Is that a thing to throw at the president if he runs again in 2024? Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's see. President Biden and Congress passed a $1.7 trillion omnibus bill. $1.6 million is chump change. No. It's not so much the money. It's the way it looks. It's the optics. This is bad. This is bad. Now, the question can be raised, I suppose, is this a case of selective prosecution against Donald Trump? Maybe. But at the end of the day, the prosecution was successful. Both of the Trump organization, the Trump payroll company, or whatever it's called, Trump payroll corporation, and yeah, Trump University. I mean, and this adds to the things that make people want to chase him, especially his political enemies. So while he may not be guilty of violating the law himself, there is culpability based on the fact that his name, quite literally, is all over this. They're just all over this. You know, and then Chris also says, ask the people who attended the rallies, they don't care. Well, everybody was kind of proud of Al Capone, okay? And the Teflon Don Arturo Gatti. You know, these people will gather around these raconteurs, and those were criminals, of course. I'm not equating Arturo Gatti. No, that was a boxer. What was Gotti's first name? Carl? What was his first name? Anyway, the Arturo Gatti was a boxer. Sorry about that, Arturo. I got that wrong. The wrong name popped into my brain stack. Anyway, you know who I'm talking about. The New York. It was the Gambino Syndicate. He was the leader then, and they called him the Teflon Don, and they called him. He was just a star. He was a celebrity. So once again, Is there some of that afoot? Yeah. But there's also something else there. Remember, these people aren't just stupid hicks wandering around following Trump from one place to another, nor are they the people that followed the Grateful Dead all around the country, trying to figure out what the next chord change was going to be. Okay, that was a nasty shot. I'm sorry. Anyway, that being said, these are voters. These are your neighbors, Chris. And I've said that to a lot of people. Said that to a lot of people on the right and the left. These are your voters. It takes all kinds. E pluribus unum. All right. So be careful about how you start talking about your neighbors. Be careful. They may disagree with you. That doesn't mean they're stupid. Not by any stretch of the imagination. All right. So what? What did you say? Good one. Oh, you're talking about the Grateful Dead? Yeah. My wife is a Grateful Dead fan. I am a musician. I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute. You said you were a drummer. How can you be a musician? Whatever. I also sing and play other instruments and so on and so on. Okay, so yes, I'm a musician, and I have to say that a lot of the things that the Grateful Dead pulled off and recorded were, shall we say, absurd. Okay. Let's talk about one other thing here while we have a moment. This came out in USA Today today. U.S. Treasury Department is taking extraordinary measures as the government nears the debt ceiling. The Treasury Department announced it will start taking extraordinary measures next week to prevent the U.S. from defaulting on its debt and potentially plunging the country into an economic crisis. This has happened over and over and over again. They're sort of kind of losing. Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Chris. You're obviously a musician too. I got that. Anyway, the Treasury, this has happened over and over. My God, it's the debt ceiling. If we don't raise our own limit on the credit card, it's going to screw up our credit. U.S. government. And I'm talking to everybody here. If you're bouncing off your debt limit, we're already in an economic crisis. Don't you think? The silliness of what has happened since the Second World War has put us in a situation where the economic factors that determine the country, right, are almost identical. The amount of gross national product versus how much debt. That ratio is almost identical to the Second World War. Arguably, okay, we're fighting the war on terror. We had COVID-19, blah, 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 blah. I get that. But that's not the Second World War. I mean, we're in an economic mess. We have to stop it. And yeah, the Treasury Department's going to start doing their little razzmatazz. In a letter addressed to House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Janet Yellen implored Congress to raise the debt ceiling and said the government will reach its borrowing limit on Thursday. That's next week. Current limit is $31.4 trillion. To avoid a default, the government will be reallocating federal funding to continue paying the government's bills. I say keep doing that. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. By the way, if you like this show, please share it with your friends. Just go ahead and share it. Send it out. Tell people about it. If you find value in it, do that, please. Give us a thumbs up or a like or what those things are in the platform you're watching. If also you're in a situation where you would like to perhaps financially support the Wells Report, you can by going to Patreon, patreon.com/The Wells Report. You can toss me a couple of bucks a month for less than a price of Starbucks. You can keep this show on the air, and I sure would appreciate it. It would be great. I like this show. I'd be listening to it if I wasn't doing it. I would. That may sound self-serving, but there you go. So I hit on something here that I wanted to expand on a little bit, right? To avoid a default, the Treasury Department will be reallocating federal funds to continue paying the government's debt. That's what Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen should be doing from now until the end of time. I don't know how long it takes to get a bill through Congress to raise the debt limit. But the simple case of the matter is, when you're against your debt limit, you take extraordinary measures. For example, you don't keep your car filled up with gas all the time. What you do is you use that gasoline, and then, say, for example, there have been times when I would put in 10 gallons because I couldn't afford to fill it up. There are times when you stop going out to dinner. What you do is you start eating the food that you have in the house. It's one of the great advantages of living in this house. Yeah. Those refrigerator recon meals are outstanding. Everybody says leftovers. We call it refrigerator recon. So you take extraordinary measures when you're up against your debt ceiling, so why don't they? I think they probably should. All right, so there have been a couple of things here. Gary said something about Chris first said, ask the people who attend Trump rallies. They don't care what kind of trouble the president gets into. That's probably true. And then there was another one. Gary said, who is in office isn't nearly as scary as the people that vote for them. They walk among us. I immediately replied with, they are us. There are people that listen to this broadcast and think I'm flamingly nuts. They absolutely do. They call me on the telephone. They say something that I think is nonsensical. I think they're flamingly nuts. So the people that you're talking about, well, they're us. And then he goes on to say, I meant the Democrats walking among us. Well, once again, they're still us. Taking shots at your neighbor isn't helping. We know this. The divisions in this nation, while described as being not as bad since the Civil War, forget the 60s. They forget all kinds of things. It's like, believe me, it's not tame. The divisions are serious, but they're mostly theoretical. I mean, on one side, you've got BLM riots. On the other, you've got January 6th riot. But the divisions are real, and the best thing to do is to stop allowing people to set us at each other. The best thing to do is to listen to what some people say. Listen to what everybody says. And if they say something you disagree with, disagree and tell them why. And they should listen to what you have to say. That's called debate. By the way, if you'd like to take part in it, by all means, do it. Call us on the telephone, 817-379-2172. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. Sorry about my smile. We're about to talk about something serious that involves our kids. But I just happened to see this. Thought I'd share it with you. A Louisiana mother shot and killed a man who broke into her home with a shovel. Her 2 children were sleeping at the time. The incident occurred at a home in the city of Hammond. That's 40 miles north of New Orleans. I've been to Hammond. Happened early Sunday morning, according to a statement from the Tangipahoa, or is it Tangipahoa? I think it's Tangipahoa. I don't know. The Tangipahoa Parish Office of the Sheriff. Authorities said 51-year-old Robert Reams was in an argument with a woman at a motel. When he left, was given a car ride by an unnamed individual. During the drive, authorities said he attacked the driver of the vehicle in what authorities determined was an attempted carjacking. The car ran into a ditch, then Reams fled the scene on foot. A few hours later, authorities were notified of shots fired at a mobile home, and responding officers found Reams dead inside. Yeah. Investigators learned that Reams broke inside the home with a shovel and a lug wrench, waking up a 30-year-old woman who lived in the home. The woman, who was not named, had been asleep in the home along with her 5-year-old and 8-year-old children. Sheriff Chief Jimmy Travis told USA Today, who gave us this article. A struggle ensued as Reams attempted to strike the woman with the shovel. She was able to arm herself with a Glock 40. Defended herself and her children to stop the violent attack, said the sheriff. The Tangipahoa, I'm going to say Tangipahoa because every time I say it, I say, you're saying it wrong in the background in my head. So I'm just going to say Tangipahoa, so I stopped doing that. Then I screwed it up. The Tangipahoa Parish Coroner's Office determined Reams died at the scene as a result of his injuries from a single gunshot wound. Nice shooting, Tex. The woman and her children were not harmed. Yep. As a matter of fact, Reams walked past one of the children who was sleeping in the living room. Reams had been on parole since March of 2021 after serving 20 years in prison for armed robbery. No arrests have been made. The sheriff's office is currently investigating the incident. We'll forward it to the district attorney's office once complete. Sheriff Travis said the mother had been fully cooperative with the investigation, adding she was exercising her Second Amendment right by possessing a firearm in her home and defending herself. Right? The sheriff went on to say, quote, I hate it for the victim. I hate that she has to deal with this and live with the mental anguish that could cause someone knowing that they were forced to take a life. But yet she needs to understand her actions could have saved her and her children's lives. So just wanted to throw that out there. That's where, once again, although reviled by people who want to render us all defenseless, that's where a good guy with a gun does a good thing. And that's what we have. Now, who exactly is running our schools? Who are these people? Do you know any of them? Is that a problem? Yeah, it's a problem when you don't know who's running your schools because your kids are there. So you may have heard about this. A 6-year-old took a gun to school. Okay? And he was a 6-year-old. He's in first grade. He took a gun to school. Really? Anyway, I guess the kid was upset about something his teacher had done or something or other, pulled out the weapon and fired it. It went through her hand as she put her hand up in front trying to protect herself, went through her hand and into her chest. She's going to be fine. And then we find out this today. Administrators at the Virginia school where a first grader shot his teacher last week learned the child may have had a weapon in his possession before the shooting, but didn't find the 9mm handgun he had despite searching his bag. Boy, these 6-year-olds watching all these cartoons and so on and so forth sure are getting crafty with hiding weapons, aren't they? I'm still trying to figure out how he was able to get past the metal detector that he walked in. Oh, that's right. There are no metal detectors in schools. Don't ask me why. Police said Friday they were not told about the tip before the shooting occurred. Kelly King, the spokesperson for the Newport News Police Department, told the Associated Press that sometime after the shooting, police learned through their investigation a school employee was notified. I'm sorry, this isn't funny. A school employee was notified of a possible gun at Rich Neck Elementary School before the January 6th shooting. What is it about that date? Newport News Police Department was not notified of this information prior to the incident. Michelle Price, a spokesperson for the Newport News School District, declined to comment on the police statement. She said that typically when school officials receive a tip about a potential weapon or other contraband, if the tip includes specific information about a particular student or a particular classroom, that's where the search starts. I'm not able to comment on whether other searches may have occurred, except for the fact the superintendent has shared that the student's backpack was searched and nothing was found at that time. But they got a tip. Superintendent George Parker, who's updating his resume, said during an online meeting with parents that at least one school administrator was notified the boy may have had a weapon before the 6-year-old shot the teacher. Parker's comments were first reported by Wavy, W-A-V-Y television. The online meeting was for parents only, but WAVY TV reported the station gained access to the meeting from a parent. On Friday, Price confirmed the superintendent's comments. Okay, so that's one thing. Then there's this. Idaho parents expressed outrage after they're concerned over a proposed school policy that would allow biological boys to use girls' restrooms and locker rooms were shut down by the local school board. Brittany Gish, her daughters Gianna and Idaho State GOP Senator Chris Trackle joined Fox News to discuss their fight against the proposed policy in the Caldwell School District. Quote, they have no interest in hearing how patients feel. They have no interest in including us in their decisions. They're just tyrants, and they want to push their agenda and do their own thing. They've proven that time and time again. That is epic dumbness, and is exactly what the parents say it is. It is tyranny. It is tyranny. Monday night's Caldwell board meeting ended abruptly and in chaos after Trackle took the podium to protest the policy that would allow students to use facilities that correspond with their gender identity. Oh, man. Trackle's microphone was shut off. The meeting was adjourned as parents shouted at the board members. Brittany argued her disagreement should not be viewed as hate. She just wants her daughter to feel comfortable at school. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. We want rights for everybody, but what I don't want is someone else's rights infringing on my children's rights. She has the rights to privacy, and other children should as well. Trackle condemned the school district for attempting to force a policy on families that put students in harm's way by removing their privacy. All the while, at the same time, they're supposed to lie about this to the parents as well, he said. Brittany said that if the new gender policy goes through, she will take her girls out of school. Yes. Yeah, she will. And I don't know whether Idaho pays for its schooling with property taxes like they do here in Texas, but I'd stop paying property taxes as well, or at least a portion of them, that whatever the percentage of property taxes are allocated to schools. If it's 100%, I'd stop paying my property tax. Let's see. Onward with this. I'm not going to subject them. I'm not going to subject them, her children, who would be taken out of school, to feel uncomfortable having their privacy taken away from them. I'll figure out how to homeschool them if I have to. That's something we should all do until these people find something else to do, which is a problem in itself. Because when you, in my view, in my opinion, when you're in a situation where these people who we don't know are pressing policies we don't agree with and then won't relent or at least even debate them, well, what else do? You take your kids out of school. Things like this. This is the best advertisement in the world for homeschooling. I don't understand what's going on with our schools. The schools are, shall we say, nuttily stupid at this particular moment. In Canada the other day, did you see those Fox News reports about the guy who wore these enormous prosthetic breasts with even more enormous nipples that poked out of a shirt, and he wore them around? He was one of the teachers in a Canadian school. How did they fight that? Did they say, "Hey, Bobby, stop wearing the boobs"? They probably did, but he didn't. And so what ended up happening from there is that they decided to change the dress code for teachers. That's how they solved it. I guess it's a solution, and I guess that might work. But on the other hand, it just goes to show you that this is not a problem solely found in the United States. I'm going to sneeze. Would you excuse me for just a moment? I love mountain cedar. Such a beautiful tree. They look like Christmas trees, actually. They look so much like Christmas trees. I like to bring local trees into my house for Christmas trees. When I lived in North Carolina, they were blue spruce. My dad brought these things in, and then after Christmas, we'd plant the tree. That was a tradition that I tried here in Texas, but had problems with because the trees would die because they were from places that weren't grown here. So I said, I know, I'll get a mountain cedar. Then I found out about cedar fever, which happens to people who are allergic to mountain cedar, and I stopped myself from doing that. But they're beautiful trees. But they sure do cause me a lot of problem. All right, getting back to the schools. The school district released the following statement after the blown-up meeting, quote, "It was disappointing that some attending refused to follow the rules, which prevented others from sharing their thoughts with the board. Caldwell School District welcomes and encourages feedback on its work, unless they actually get some. We do not welcome those who refuse to follow the steps necessary for a civil, courteous, and respectful environment for that feedback to occur." What about the civil, courteous, and respectful environment that allows parents to talk? Anyone? So when it comes to that, when it comes to CRT, when it comes to what's in a school library, for crying out loud, when it comes to those things, when it comes to drag shows in schools, my original question remains: who's running our schools? Loudoun, Virginia schools essentially were at the forefront of all of this. They found out about CRT and they went ballistic, right? They went ballistic. And so they started voting these people out of office. These school board members, they started voting them out of office. The idea that the Democrat candidate, the sitting governor of the state before the last election, actually stood up and said, I believe that was Terry McAuliffe. Yeah. Terry McAuliffe stood up and said, "I don't think parents should have the right to tell people who are teaching their children what to teach." Bye-bye, Terry. Nice career. Gone. So once again, if there is something in your school that you don't agree with, respectfully, courteously, cordially, professionally, go and say, "This will not stand." And when that happens, and if indeed you're rebuffed, well, you know what you're going to be doing next campaign season. This goes back to something that I keep talking about. These people that we put in office are screwing us up. We have to put different people in office. Professional politicians have run up a bill that's $32 trillion and is going to bounce off the debt ceiling in June. And the Treasury Department is having to make some very serious moves to try to keep the good faith and credit of the United States intact, which is what they should be doing all the time anyway. It's called budgeting yourself. It's budget discipline. But what we need to do is we need to start electing ourselves. I've reduced it to 3 words. Elect thy neighbor. As a matter of fact, don't even wait for your school board to start screwing stuff up. Just replace them anyway. This is the Wells Report. Back in 3 minutes. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. So I asked, who are the people running our schools? Cleo said school districts have become too woke. Yeah, that's the latest excuse for being, I was going to say monsters. Then I said, there's got to be a better word. And then I said, no, monsters covers it. Yeah, it's the monsters and those policies that have to get stopped. Buddy asks, how do you refuse to pay a portion of your property tax? I'd like to know because my kids are homeschooled. Here's what you do. The state assembly, the state government in Texas, meets every 2 years. It's called the biennium. It is a feeding frenzy, a frantic feeding frenzy of legislation that occurs, what is it, 120 days? Something like that? By the way, remind me, I'm going to be, I may or may not be on the air Monday and Tuesday, perhaps Wednesday of next week, because I'm going to Governor Abbott's inauguration and a whole bunch of festivities that go with that. Basically doing what I've been doing, which is to make friends with these people, so they have some idea that we're still doing the Wells Report, and so I got to go do that. I'll tell you more about that later. So, how do you refuse to pay a part or all of your property tax? You get in touch with your representative, and you say to all your homeschooling buddies, and there are many of them around, buddy. Okay, there are homeschooling associations. You all draft a letter to your representatives, and you say you want a bill that relieves the burden of property tax from those people not accessing the public schools, or a portion of the property tax for people that don't have people in their schools. Colton is going to college. He's paying his way. We're paying his way. We're all paying his way. Why am I paying property tax that goes to a school district? The last time I interacted with the principal of the school my son was in wouldn't even deign to see me. Why should I be paying why should I be paying property tax for that? The answer is you shouldn't. So if you are homeschooling your kids and there's a qualification process necessary, is it an accredited curriculum that you're teaching? Are you documenting it, so on and so on and so on? Hell no, you shouldn't be paying property tax, or at least the portion of property tax that goes to schools. So what you got to do is you got to get a bill done. I got a big mouth, so I would call everybody. I've got friends in the legislature, including the lieutenant governor. I'd call him on the phone and say, hey, probably ought to consider this. Let's see. Gary asks a very poignant question. Whose idea was it to have drag queens reading stories and drag shows in our schools? Where'd that come from? That's a good question. I'm going to find out. Cleo says we're too far behind in education to waste time on social engineering. Completely correct. Let's see what else. Gary Absher says term limits. Okay, but what if you get one you like? What if you get somebody you like? Just asking. The problem is we regular people don't want to make our life public and run for office. Yeah, politics is a dirty, nasty game. Well, I don't want to subject myself to that. No, go ahead. Just do what Katie Hobbs did. I'm not going to deal with it. And then expect the voters to go ahead and realize that we're doing something wrong. And just sit there and say, look, you guys can elect these paragons of virtue all you want to. They're running our nation into the ditch. I'm a regular person. I'm just a regular guy. Okay? Vote for somebody that does all the right things and and looks really good. Okay, go ahead and vote for them. If that's important to you, vote for them. By all means. But if you want something to change, do something different. Here I am. Let's see what else. Not new for people to want their teachers to teach educational materials and not indoctrination. That's what Cleo says. Yeah, that's not new. What is new is the fact that parents have to do that more now than ever before. Okay? And that is unfortunately a fact of life. That's what's happening. Let's see what else. Chances are that you're probably not going to get somebody in public office you want to keep. Term limits. Okay. Just saying. I disagree. Cool going to Austin to pitch the Wells Report to Greg Abbott. It'll actually be Dan Patrick, who is the lieutenant governor of Texas. Why am I going to pitch the Wells Report to the lieutenant governor of Texas? Because he owns a radio station in Houston. Yeah, and I want it's a talk station, and I want the Wells Report on it. So I'm going to go say, hey, I've tried to talk to your program director. I'd like to talk to you directly. Would you help me out and clear the Wells Report in Houston, Texas? I'm working on it here in Dallas. I'm working on a radio station. I'm working on a radio station in Austin and in San Antonio and some other places. So hopefully we'll be able to get that all done. All right. I want my Fort Worth Independent School District portion of my property taxes to go to my police and firemen. Bam. That would be good. Those people that are homeschooling their kids or don't have kids get to allocate where their where their money goes. Your voice will sell itself. Thank you, Mike. That's very, very nice. Very nice. But it hasn't so far. You're listening to the Wells Report. Stick around. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. All right, that's hour number 2 in the books. I have to keep track now. That's hour number 2 in the books. We'll be back with more in a moment. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We report the news here. We report it honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. I make commentary, which is not the news. It's debatable, and so we debate. You can debate anything you hear on this broadcast. You can do so by joining us on the chat room, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. If you're watching on Rumble and Patreon, this show was recorded live earlier in the day, like right now, for the people that are watching everywhere else. Anyway, so if you want to get in touch with me, do so by sending me an email. The email is thewellsreport@frontier.com. All I ask is that in the subject line, all caps would be good. Put the platform that you are reaching out on. In other words, if you're on Patreon or Rumble, put Patreon or Rumble in the subject line and let me know what you think. Last hour, we were talking about who's running our schools. Does anybody know? If you don't know who's running our schools, if you don't know everybody on the school board, if you don't know everybody, all the administrators running your kid's school, you need to find out. You got to have names, faces, go to their website, find out all that information. If it's not there, then go to a near school or go to the district office and say, how come I can't find out who all these administrators and educators and teachers and principals and assistant principals and vice assistant principals and all the other people that the teachers unions have been able to get infused into our schools so they have lots of dues to play political games with. Anyway, if you don't know all that stuff, get a hold of that stuff because you got to know who's running the schools. I mean, it's not direct accountability, but at least, oh, wait a minute, they know who I am. Yeah, we know who you are. All right. And if, by the way, something that happens, and even if something doesn't happen, run for school board. Okay. Can it be a mess? Sure it can be. But when somebody is showing up in school or running for school board and so on and so forth, you've got to take a very close look at the person. And you got to determine whether or not the people saying, no, he was an axe murderer in Dodge City, Kansas, when just after he got out of high school. It's obviously false. But the simple case of the matter is that just because somebody says something like that doesn't mean you shouldn't vote for him. What about George Santos, JD? Yeah, George Santos is an interesting case. This is a guy who basically created a political character to be voted for, and he was successful. Should he quit? Speaker McCarthy, since he's a Republican, Speaker McCarthy says, the voters are going to decide that. I'll let them do it. That's okay. That's good. Because once again, what have paragons of virtue gotten us? We have the ability to overlook that stuff, which is why Donald Trump is referred to as former President Donald Trump. But what we have to do is we have to do something better. And whenever something offends your sense of public logic, then maybe you should act. Like I said, we were talking about school districts a little while ago, last hour. In fact, if you missed it, go back and look at it. Pretty good. First hour is pretty good too. But if you do that, then you'll know that we've been talking about schools and so on. But this is too good to pass up from a standpoint of things you need to know. This has to do with the academy, the colleges and university system, which are equally dumb. Today, I can't remember what the name of the university is, but what they did is they decided that they were no longer going to use the word field, as in field of study, right? Yeah, they're no longer going to use that word field. They're going to reverse to the word practicum. Yeah. You no longer have a field of study or a field of endeavor. You have a practicum of study and a practicum of endeavor. Well, wait a minute. Don't they realize that that's misappropriation of Latin, which is a slap at the Italian people? If you thought that was stupid, listen to this. One black college instructor's dress code for the semester landed him in hot water on social media this week, with many users claiming his mandate to ban hoodies and do-rags, twerk shorts, and coochie cutter shorts were discriminatory against black students. Last week, a snapshot of a computer science class syllabus from North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University went viral on Twitter thanks to the attention-grabbing dress code policy. The computer science class instructor, a black male, he's African-American, whom Twitter allegedly identified as NCAT professor Derek LaFleur, listed several items, including bonnets, do-rags, hoodies, booty shorts, coochie cutter shorts. I have trouble saying that. Coochie cutter shorts, twerk shorts were not to be worn in his class. Yeah. The syllabus declared these items not appropriate. Beneath the list, the instructor provided a bit of guidance for the policy, saying, quote, if you wear it to bed or the club, don't wear it to class. The rest of the guidance could not be read as the tweet did not contain the entire document. Here's some of it. Midterm will only be given twice, only once with the, hold on, stand by. Yeah, it's still cut off. Only once, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Only one with the grade counted. No makeups for missed midterms. Let's see. The lowest grade in each course, at each test, will be dropped. Nice. Grading appeals will not be done through email. You've got to make an appointment. Makeup exams, quizzes, no makeups will be given. No extra credit unless offered by the, and then it gets cut off. Okay? So that's the horrifying policy statement this obviously damaged person tried to import or indoctrinate his children with. You can only indoctrinate your children, your students. You can only indoctrinate your students with approved craziness. You can't come up with your own list of craziness and say you can't do that and indoctrinate these kids. That was what we call sarcasm, in case you're wondering. By the way, Gary points out, that would be a very good list of things for people to consider when they went to Walmart. Yeah, but you'd have to add butt crack. No showing of butt crack. Yeah. The list caused a stir on Twitter, with many users accusing the instructor of being anti-black. What? The guy's black. No, he's anti-black. Oh. The original account that posted the image asked, GD hoodies be what? Another user replied, this is giving anti-black. Imagine typing coochie cutters and twerk shorts into a syllabus. To which the original poster said, nah, for real. Another user commented, very anti-black. I don't know. I know it's not anti-black. I'm just going to opine here. How many computer companies, corporations, what have you, allow their employees to wear coochie cutter shorts in the office? Yeah, not many. Like none. Just saying. I mean, you're getting ready for your life, right? What was that desiderata? Set aside the childish things of youth. I mean, seriously? Sooner or later, you got to not just look. You can't just be brilliantly educated to go do things considering that you're going to college and therefore the best and the brightest, but you also have to look the part. I'm just saying, right? There's also an admonishment to please don't tattoo your face. Let's move on. Others were annoyed that clothing items as common as hoodies were not allowed in class. Wait, this is a comp science course. You can't wear a hoodie? The default uniform for people who do careers in that S word. Okay. Forbes.com. How many times you use the S word in a computer lab from one of the major IT companies? Forbes.com, which reported on the incident, noted, quote, forbidding black students from wearing hoodies to class does not signal some suspicion. It added, quote, it's important to remember that hoodies became emblematic of certain negative assumptions in America about black youth after the tragic murder of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin in 2012. Continuing to fuel the anti-black allegations, the report added, however, the negative connotation of wearing hoodies does not apply to white teenagers and young adults as much as it does to black young people. Excuse me. My son, one of my sons, my oldest son, liked to pierce his ears. He got those great big loop things, he pierced his ears, and he had a couple of other piercings on his face. He wore hoodies and so on and so forth, and got stopped by the police on a regular basis, right? Got stopped by the police on a regular basis. And he came up to me and says, man, the police keeps pulling me over. Yeah, well, maybe you should stop looking like a hood. Okay? Now, I wasn't referring to black people of his age. I was referring to hoods. Those are people that commit crime. Try not to look like you commit crime, and the police probably won't spend as much time dealing with you. And that doesn't make any difference what color you are. It just means you may want to, the guy's almost 40. Come on, Jack, wake up. Just saying. Anyway, back to the story. Other users on Twitter were simply shocked by the language the instructor used to describe the inappropriate dress. A user wrote, imagine typing booty shorts, coochie cutter shorts, and twerk shorts in a syllabus and being FR, I'm crime. I've got to get the Hip Kids English Hip Kids Dictionary. It's around here somewhere. I've used it before. I'll have to find it during the break. Though some users push back on the idea of the dress code being anti-black, claiming it's just a policy to promote decorum. A user wrote, How is it giving anti-black? A hoodie is one of the things you have to meet people where they are and speak their language. Making a dress code isn't anti-black. It's establishing decorum. Cooler heads have prevailed. So there you go. The Urban Dictionary. I will not ever go to the Urban Dictionary again. The last time I did, I actually wept. This is the Wells Report. Back with more coming up in just a couple of moments if I can get my mouse to do its job. See you in a second. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Let's see. Cleo says, wow, it's so terrible that a black professor wants his students to actually know how to dress properly so they can be remarkable and able to get a job later in life. Cleo, by the way, is African American, just in case you want to know. Lots of minorities in this country have become the caricatures that have become the caricatures that liberals have painted for them. And then Yvonne says, hoodies, I don't know, we wear them here at work. Even have them with the company logo, so it's a legit accessory. But I've never seen anybody here wearing them with the hood up. Well, yeah, okay. So, sorry, I just have to ask this question, Yvonne. Many of the people in the office wear coochie shorts? How about Daisy Dukes? By the way, what are twerk shorts? What do they look like? I'm just asking. I don't think I've ever seen, I was going to say a pair, but I didn't want to put that out there. I'm just saying. As the number of people experiencing homelessness increases across the country, more cities and states have passed laws making it illegal to live out of tents and cars or sleep in public spaces. More than 100 jurisdictions have had such bans on the books for years, according to the National Homelessness Law Center. That's something that looks good in print. The National Homelessness Law Center. Just try to say it. In recent months, high-profile measures have been approved targeting homelessness in many Western cities and across entire states. Federal data shows that 582,462 people were experiencing homelessness on a single night in January of 2022. Experts warn more people will enter homelessness as housing costs increase, as has been the case for decades in cities such as New York and in much of California. If visible, unsheltered homelessness continues to grow, city leaders will have an easier time passing measures advocating, or that advocates say, criminalize basic needs such as sleep and sheltering oneself. Eric Tars, legal director for the National Homelessness Law Center, told USA Today. The danger is that the worse the housing situation gets, more people we see on the streets, the more people will push for these punitive policies. Yeah, it's almost like, solving problems. These states and cities have passed laws making it illegal to live in tents or sleep on public property. Missouri has done it. My God. A statewide ban on sleeping in state-owned land or on state-owned land took effect in Missouri, making it a misdemeanor to sleep in public spaces like parks or under bridges. Experts say Missouri's law is concerning because it covers the state and adds pressure on top of municipal bans. It's wrong to assume that people experiencing homelessness can just leave and go to another state. Yeah, they can. Yeah, they can. Of course, they're going to have to get a job first to be able to get the bus fare, but they can move. People have an assumption that homeless people are infinitely mobile and they'll go someplace else. Yeah, they will. But most people, contrary to this notion of vagrancy and transience, are homelessness in the community where they were once housed. Yeah. I've thought about homelessness a lot. Mainly because I'm worried that Susan is going to throw me out of the house. Well, it's possible. And so because I think about stuff like that, I think about how that would look or how that would work. And so what I've discovered is this. There are alternatives to homelessness. One of them is getting a good job. And I know that may seem cruel because there are people that can't. But I'm not talking about most of those people. Most of those people can. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. See, I'm trying to get in touch with, okay. She did respond. Yvonne Field said, hey, wait a minute. I work at a computer company or something like that. And we wear hoodies all the time. We even have company hoodies, but we don't wear the hood with the hoods up. Yeah. I then asked, well, what about coochie shorts? Coochie cutters. Coochie cutter shorts. Yvonne says, I haven't seen coochie cutter shorts here at work. Pretty sure they'd be asked to change if they came dressed like that. I used to work at a radio station in Atlanta, but I violated my rule. I violated my rule about this one radio station because it was magic. That's not the name of the station. The name of the station was 94Q in Atlanta. I did afternoon drive for a couple of years there. And absolutely fell in love with that radio station. I got written up once. You know what I got written up for? Wearing shorts. Yeah, there was a dress code there. And Jan Jeffries was the program director. Great program director. And that taught me something. And I stopped wearing, I obviously started dressing better. Let's see. So, by the way, nobody's answered what twerk shorts are. What are twerk shorts? Considering what twerking is, how would a set of twerk shorts even be designed? And hey, I don't know. I just don't get it. All right. I've spent an awful lot of time on this broadcast talking about unions. Unions have the same genus or beginning. Employee unions get started because management is blowing it at some level or another. And what they do is they screw up enough so that everybody says, this isn't right. This is just not right. And so what they do is they form themselves into a group, and maybe some of them say, let's start making decisions collectively about what we will accept from our workplace and what we don't accept from our workplace. And so a group of workers makes that decision, and it doesn't get followed because management doesn't care in the first place, and they go out on strike, and suddenly management begins to care. The idea of this catches on. And suddenly there are workers' unions all over the place, and so on and so on. Well, it comes back from management. They say, well, okay, so you guys are all fired, ready to go with forming yourselves into a group. Why don't we just fire you? And they said, back in the day, it's because we're the best workers you can find. And the unions set up training programs, an entire hierarchy of training programs. Start out as a laborer, you get an apprenticeship, you become a journeyman, then you become a master, and so on and so on. And you could get an apprenticeship at a union and get paid enough money and actually learn a trade. That was part of your pay. Well, union said, yeah, that's really, really good. And so, yeah, union labor was the best. And then union labor bosses started playing games with the money. They started with a pension fund. Jimmy Hoffa, the Teamsters union boss for, I don't know, decade or something like that, started investing with the mafia. Oops. And then other things, then of course there would be a union endorsement. And then suddenly the politicians realized, wait a minute, this is a very, very good voting bloc. Maybe I want to be a part of that. And so the politics in unions and union leadership began to grow. Until now, the politics are more important than the workers. Do you have union labor building? Do you have union carpenters framing your house? Nope. Do you have union electricians wiring your house? Nope. You know, do you have union mechanics? No, you don't. You don't have all these things. The Teamsters are still around because the Teamsters, well, you know, their management, tough guys, truck drivers mainly. The Teamsters will demand that their union do the right thing. Not that I'm a big fan of the Teamsters, not that I'm a negative fan of the Teamsters. I'm not an enemy of them. But I do insist that unions actually take care of their workers. The UAW is not too bad at that. But what ends up happening is that a lot of these unions, like the teachers union, becomes nothing more than a way to use union dues as a way to affect politics in the United States. The NEA is a perfect example. So, in order to combat union abuses, and I'm not just talking about the union itself abusing their workers, a lot of these people in unions said there's got to be some kind of a remedy, and they came up with a legislative one. It was a right to work law. Well, now, in Lansing, Michigan, a fight is brewing over the future of the Michigan right to work law. It's drawing national attention. Democrat lawmakers in Lansing, they have full control of the state legislature there, are looking at repealing the law Republicans passed a decade ago, allowing workers in union jobs to opt out of paying union dues and fees. While this badly weakens malfunctioning unions. Because what ends up happening is that people say, I'm not getting anything but this union except, I get to go without work for a while when they get all snotted out about something that management's doing. Or I can't go to this particular grocery store because some other union is picketing it for some other reason. I'm just not getting my money's worth. So they opt out. Well, rather than solve the problems that make people want to be union members, what union management is doing is leaning on their political buddies and saying, hey, you got to do something about this right to work law. People are doing union jobs without paying union dues. Well, my solution is be a better union. Republican lawmakers made Michigan a right-to-work state in 2012. Thousands of protesters massed at the Capitol while police on horseback and in riot gear tried to control the scuffles that broke out. Michigan was not the first state to enact right-to-work, but it is a state steeped in labor history, and now is poised to become the first state in nearly 60 years to ditch such a law, with Democrats controlling the executive and legislative branches of the state government for the first time in 40 years. Michigan should be first, said Jennifer Root, the executive director of the SEIU, the Service Employees International Union. That's a public workers union that essentially supplanted civil service law, which is disastrous. They represent 30,000 public and private sector workers in Michigan. Michigan and unions in this state built the middle class in this country. I'm not so sure about that, but that seems to be the popular propaganda now. There's no reason we can't do it again. Others push back, not just in Michigan. We're going to fight them? You betcha we're going to fight, said Mark Mix, the president of the National Right to Work Committee based in Virginia. I think it's going to be a big one. I think so, too. I think it's a debate worth having. And somebody in that debate needs to stand up and say, hey, if you're having problems losing union membership, you need to be a better union. How about doing that? Workers should be able to choose whether part of their pay goes to support a union, argue those who defend right-to-work laws. But opponents say all employees benefit from union contracts, from the union contracts that unions negotiate. So there should be no free riders who enjoy the benefits without contributing to the cost. Okay. Democrat leaders have not said how quickly they plan to vote on the issue, but the bills to repeal right to work with Democrat sponsors from both chambers were among the first announced when the new legislative session began Wednesday. Republicans, meanwhile, have warned that kicking off the session with repealing right to work could threaten bipartisan cooperation on future issues. And the political merry-go-round fires up again. Planning meetings to protect the law have already begun in Michigan among Michigan groups that include the Michigan Freedom Fund, which is backed by the wealthy DeVos family, and Michigan chapters of American for Prosperity, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, and the Associated Builders and Contractors, said Jimmy Green, president of the ABC, Associated Builders and Contractors, who attended a strategy meeting last week, or attended. Both the House and Senate of Michigan convened day before yesterday for the first time in 2023. The conservative Mackinac Center for Public Policy had already erected billboards near the Detroit, Lansing, Flint, and Grand Rapids area and launched radio and digital ads and a website touting right to work as a boon for Michigan workers. It is. It is, because no matter how big a union is, there's still more non-union jobs in America than there are union jobs. Right to work saves Michigan workers millions of dollars every year, said one of the billboards. Union leaders say the message is false and don't go unanswered. They hope their numbers can make up for what they see as a financial mismatch in getting their message out. Ron Bieber, who's the president of the Michigan AFL-CIO, described right to work as an uncalled for attack on working men and women. Right to work is an attack on people who work. We hope to work with Governor Gretchen Whitmer and the Democrat legislature to restore the balance of power. He said the quiet part out loud. To restore the balance of power, level the playing field, once again give Michigan working families a fair shot at a chance for a decent life. Unionized rates in Michigan fell before GOP lawmakers made it a right-to-work state. Yeah, see? What union workers are being asked to do is choose between who's going to minimize their benefits, whether it's their own union leadership or whether it's the state. This is a tough question. The share of Michigan workers who are union members has continued to decline since then. Today, tens of thousands of workers protected by union agreements don't provide any financial support to the union. Well, I could see them not being protected by the union. Does that mean there's some sort of a union bonus for those people who are union members and a bonus that is not realized by people who are not? Could be, but that would amount to the companies paying union dues, wouldn't it? Union membership in gradual decline for decades took a similar dip in Michigan in the 10 years before the passage of right to work, having stood at just over 21% in 2002. I thought would have been a lot higher than that, considering the car manufacturers there. In 2012, 17% of Michigan workers were union members. By 2021, the most recent year for which data is available, the share is now 13%. So unions are fighting for their lives. Well, how do they win? They win by having the best workers on the planet. That means that you provide a better product. Union members are better trained. They work harder. They're worth having union versus non-union workers. You have to provide something to management of companies besides another headache for them to deal with because their union labor might not be happy about it, about something. How about this? How about building better workers? You build a better mousetrap and the world will beat a path to your door. In 2021, more than 80,000 Michigan workers covered by a collective bargaining agreement were not dues-paying union members. That's a lot of money, including nearly 46,000 in the private sector. It's the private sector numbers that are relevant if Michigan's right-to-work law is repealed. That's because of a 2018 U.S. Supreme Court decision barring public sector unions from requiring employees covered by collective bargaining agreements to pay dues. Any repeal would only affect Michigan workers in the private sector, where slightly more than 9% are union members in 2021 compared to just over 11% in 2012. So look, The right to work law does protect more people than it damages. And the answer is clear to me. Because I'm a competitor. Started out that way, and radio just made it better. Because what I would do is, okay, a company would decide to replace me with somebody else, go right ahead. See what happens. Every single time I was replaced, the radio station lost. Some were sold. And so that's just something that is a fact of life. This is the Wells Report. Back in a moment. Oh, I don't want to do that. I almost clicked the wrong thing there, but that would be cool. Somebody that I sincerely respect is my brother, Gary Olivier. He says, I've been on both sides. The unions are way too corrupted. I've seen the right to work side too. My last job, many of the supervisors touted to their subordinates, constantly threatening their jobs. I also saw a good number of civil rights violations by these supervisors. The persons victimized were too afraid to make a formal complaint because they were in fear of losing their jobs. Both sides need to meet in the middle. Chris Grimes says, Gary, let's extend that thought. Here's some other things I would appreciate not having to pay for. Other people's car accidents through my auto insurance when I don't get in an accident myself. Yeah, true. 2, says Chris, other people's house fires, floods, etc. through my homeowner's insurance when my house is just fine, thank you. The thing about that, Chris, is the problem with what you're talking about is homeowners insurance is required by your mortgage holder, which protects their investment. You don't have to have home insurance if you own the place. Dave Ramsey, who is a financial guru, talks a lot about the number one status symbol in America should be a paid off mortgage. I agree. So once you do that, then you're not shackled to that. 3, government funded firemen and women who put out fires in homes I don't personally own. Well, except you're paying those people to be there when you do need them. Let's see, government's funded police who respond to break-ins, domestic disturbances when I've had no such problems. Okay, well, once again, excuse me, Mountain Cedar. Government funded police when you have no such problems. Well, once again, at some point you're going to have one of those such problems. All right. It's just a matter of time. Roads that I don't drive on, bridges I don't cross. Gary responded, I actually had a union delegate tell me I needed to show him some interest and rubbed his fingers together, indicating he wanted money. He went on to say if I didn't show him some interest, I wouldn't be going out again for a long time. That is corruption. Criminal corruption. Yeah. And of course, if Michigan decides to dump their right to work law, then nobody is going to complain about that corruption. That guy did that right out in the open. And he did that right out in the open because he could. Because the union was strong enough to be able to keep you from working at all. If you didn't work, if you didn't do what he said. Yeah, that's one of the problems. Chris goes, water and sanitation infrastructure I never use. Do you live in a house, Chris? Do you flush your toilet? Please say yes. Well, all that stuff that keeps it from floating out in your front yard like in many countries around the world. Yeah, that's what you're paying for. National Guard troops that are of no current specific benefit to me. They are, I assure you, being a member of the Texas State Guard and serving with National Guard troops, they're essential to your state. Absolutely essential. And finally, government-funded research into diseases I don't have. Kind of self-focused, aren't we? There, Chrissy? Let's see. Gary says, hey, wait a minute. He's got a point. Customizing your health insurance, like, for example, why do I need an insurance policy that covers a hysterectomy? Good point. Yeah. By the way, Mike Renwee points out that government-funded researchers likely gave us COVID-19. That is correct. Or could be correct. Did I say that it was correct? I meant it could be. By the way, I know it's fashionable to stomp on Pete Buttigieg. He is the transportation secretary, but the FAA has spent the last 36 hours figuring out exactly what happened to the NOTAM. That's the Notice to Air Missions System Interruption, which brought the airlines to a halt. The agency determined a data file was damaged by personnel who failed to follow proper procedures. The system is functioning properly, and cancellations today were below 1%. Okay? Now, there is a union out there, the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers. If I was running the union, first of all, I would say an IAMAW worker would have never made that mistake. And then I'd back it up with workers who would never make that mistake. So these are the things that, I happen to believe that competition and merit is good. I happen to believe that if you do build a better mousetrap, you will indeed you will indeed have the world beating a path to your door. If you have the best union in the world, people will literally travel to the United States just to be a part of it. Should there be unions? Yeah. Yeah. Should there be public workers unions? No. No. Civil service law is just fine. Because that way you don't have management problems in the beginning, don't you? Or do you? See? You're listening to the Wells Report. Look, I may be off the next couple of days. Watch Facebook. I'll be putting up notices on that in just a couple of minutes. I'm going to the Texas inauguration. So that may be Monday and Tuesday and perhaps Wednesday. Like I said, I'll put it up on Facebook for you so you know. God bless you and all of yours. Have yourself a wonderful weekend. I really appreciate the fact that you were here this week. Thank you. And I'll talk to you on Monday. Excuse me. Yes, I will talk to you on Monday. Yeah, I'll talk to you on Monday, okay? Take care. Be safe. Make good decisions. See you later.